Welcome to Complex Creatures, exploring spirituality and the common good.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Complex Creatures, the podcast where we explore spirituality, traditions, practices, habits, spiritual disciplines, and we explore them from the point of view of thinking about how spirituality is an underutilized tool for public spaces, maybe the common good, or just how we engage more broad conversation. Too often, spirituality and religion, all of that is associated with personal growth or something that's merely private. But I contend and believe that spirituality is something that actually is kind of interesting for the way we organize our communities. I'm Jared Longbonds. I have a PhD in theology. I'm a senior minister at Peachtree Christian Church in Atlanta, Georgia, interested in all this stuff. And I'm with my good friend Alan, who helps produce this for me. And he's a professor up in the mountains. I'm just going to say the mountains. That's where you are. You're up high above me. How are you doing, Alan?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Great to see you.
Has it gotten chilly there?
It did get chilly about yesterday.
Yeah, it's chilly here too down in Atlanta. I tell you what, guys, we are in the middle of October as we're recording this episode. So that means a couple things. One, it means that as we record this, we are only, a couple weeks away from this election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And I don't know, Alan, but if you're like me, you're probably tired of all the robocalls, texts, and everything else. And you're
100%. 100%. Yeah. And I listened to a podcast yesterday, not to go on a tangent, but I listened to a podcast yesterday where one guy came on, Christian guy came on, and he was like, this is why you should vote for Kamala Harris. And another Christian guy came on and says, this is why you should vote for Trump. They had exactly the same points.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. Like exactly the same points and had exactly the same arguments. It's just that they came to the different conclusion, and that cracked me up, my friend.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Well, to buoy me, to hold me up
yes,
from the weight of all the political doldrums, because for me, it is something that's I don't enjoy. I don't even enjoy I'm not one of those people who enjoys watching the politics. I mean, I have an interest as everyone does, but I don't enjoy it. So buoying me up is that we are in the middle of October, my favorite month of the year.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. And I've been, the other day I noticed like 4 or 5 people said to me in one or another that we're in the quote unquote spooky season. And it just occurred to me, I'd never realized that is now the way we talk about the month of October, or maybe even sometime in September. But whenever it's, I guess, okay socially to decorate your house for Halloween, to order pumpkin spice lattes, and to watch horror. I don't know. We call it the spooky season. And I guess that kind of annoyed me a little. But I get it. We're trying to get maybe squeeze all the juice out of the turnip here and just trying to get as much out of it as we can. But in terms of spirituality, in terms of our practices, it got me thinking, and I've thought about this many times in my life, but it got me thinking recently, just like, why is it that we are naturally drawn to quote unquote a spooky season? Why is it that we have a thing on the calendar like Halloween, or, in other cultures, the Day of the Dead, when there's this kind of element of focusing on death, spirituality, maybe the world of the spirits, all kinds of, kind of conversations that surround that. Why is it that we have an interest in horror? Why is it that we create monster stories? So everything that kind of goes along with quote unquote spooky season, the question is why? And then maybe the deeper question beyond just the why are we drawn to it is what could it mean for us spiritually, or what could it mean for us if we practiced any sort of practice that reflected on any of those themes? Let me just open up a can and ask you, Alan, what's knee jerk? Why is it that why do you think you have an interest, and I know you do, in quote unquote the spooky season? What and is it a lifelong fascination? Is it
sure
for you?
So a handful of things. The first one is that I think that I, just like many other people, are fascinated by death. It's something we're only going to experience once, and I think that we are oddly attracted to stories about death. You know, like there's a joke in the so I'm a professor of digital art at Johnson University up in Knoxville, and I teach a lot of video production and therefore a lot of like filmmaking kind of courses. And there's a joke amongst the student filmmaking community that it isn't a student film until you see a dead body. And
it's easy to get an actor to play that, huh?
Well, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, when people are making a student film, the logical conclusion to the film is, and then they died. And you know, we did a film festival last year of student projects. There were 7 projects, and of the 7 projects, 6 of them had a dead body in them. You know, and the college that I teach at is a Christian college. You know, the most vicious act of murder was actually executed by the granddaughter of the president of the university in one of these films. And you know, it's one of those things where I think that we're all sort of fascinated by it, and I think that I needed a season of time where it was socially acceptable to explore those ideas and themes. I think you know, if I'm over intellectualizing it, that's probably it. If I'm just giving you like a gut reaction to it, I would say I just think that stuff is cool.
Yeah,
I have always really enjoyed, even when I was a kid and it was sort of kid-based spooky stuff. I really loved it. I mean, I had like a really fun reaction when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street, Nightmare Before Christmas. That's what it's called, The Nightmare Before Christmas. And I really loved werewolf stories when I was a kid. I really loved vampire stories like that are made for children, you know, when I was a kid. And as I got older, frankly, I had a really, really negative reaction to sort of slasher horror or whatever when I got a little bit older. But I still really enjoy, you know, psychological horror, and I really enjoy like just exploring other people's myths in relationship to how we interact with the macabre.
I often quote this I think it's like a self-published book by this guy named Lint Hatcher. And I was at this event. It was like this Cornerstone Christian Music Festival or whatever. And they
I know that one.
Yeah, it happened for decades, I think, out of Bushnell, Illinois, like Western Illinois, and acres owned by the Jesus People USA. And, you know, and they had like, it was basically like a Woodstocky vibe, right?
Yep.
And, you know, I once was dating a girl whose parents sold merch there. So I went a couple different seasons, but I wasn't really into all the music. But they had this like thing called the Imaginarium where they would bring in like professors to talk about German Expressionism and early monster movies, the Universal Studios. So, and I, you know, the intellectual nerdy part of me really wanted to go to those. And they talked about sci-fi and the RKO pictures and all this stuff. And they brought that guy, Lint Hatcher, and he wrote this book called The Magic 8-Ball Test. And somewhere in there, he talks about being born with the spooky gene. And it just resonated with me because I that's how my mom was. And, you know, I grew up, you know, loving the catalog from Kmart or whatever store that came in the mail. It had the Halloween costumes. And I flocked to that area of the store. And, you know, and to me, you know, I watched old monster movies and things. And it just... something drew me to it. And then, you know, and then I caught Halloween. I caught Michael Myers when I was way too young. Of course, you know, an older cousin shows it to you. You know, your mom doesn't know, that kind of thing. And, you know, even with things that were truly disturbing to me like that, they truly scared me. And if it was gory, it truly, it repelled me. I mean, it was absolutely, you know, I can't even give a good word for how I felt about it. Because I'm not really for now, but I think, you know, it's always just simply the question of why. So why character doing this evil thing. It's why there's a fascination with people who do serial murder now. Like, but the why, and that kind of question is, you can transpose it over even the non-human supernatural, like the question of life after death, or the demonic, or the, even if you want to go more into the alien category, it's the why and the what that's behind the phenomenon that we see. It's the mysterious. It's how that this season keeps touching and poking that line of between the phenomenon we see and the kind of the energies behind it, or the substance behind it. So it's just pointing to the grand mystery.
Sure.
And I think this season it really is tease us up for that. And I think there are other seasons that used to, and I think they still do, we just don't culturally appeal to them as much. I think Christmas time, there is a Christian tradition of ghost stories around Christmas time.
Absolutely.
And that is not some, what's that carol that we sometimes sing as we sing the old story, and help me with this. So it's a very famous Christmas carol. We sing it. We talked about the ghost stories. There's a line that says, "Sing the ghost stories." Tales.
I know which one you're talking about.
I was a kid. I was like, "What ghost stories?" And the only one I could think of was A Christmas Carol. However, there's a lot of, like, in particular, Christian ghost stories. So I think that there is this chargedness to seasons. Maybe we can lean into this old kind of Celtic idea of thin spaces and thin times. You hear that sometimes in popular culture, that there's this kind of quote unquote pan-Celtic idea, whether it belongs to one Celtic group or another, or it's just a revivalist understanding of the Celtic world. But the idea is that there's this space, there's places in the world that are thin. That the world of the supernatural and the natural, the world of the physical world and the spiritual world are what separates them is closer or thinner than at other places, and that there are times like that as well. In the calendar, whether it's harvest and the season or New Year, right, or or great celebrations. So maybe there's something about those times and things that kind of poke it for us, and they kind of nudge us further, think a little deeper, play with the questions, play with the mysterious, and even if it's not dread and horrific, there is a spooky or a fear. There's an element of fear wrapped up in anything that's filled with awe. There's that which no greater can be thought is kind of one definition of God. Well, that kind of thing, it kind of elicits some sort of tremble, right?
Sure.
I don't know. I don't have a great through line answer. This is just us talking about it, right?
That's exactly right. This is exactly right.
Questions on, yeah.
By the way, the Christmas carol we were trying to think of was "It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year."
It's the most wonderful time of the year, and it talks about ghost stories, right?
Yeah, there will be scary ghost stories and tales of the glories.
Yeah, and it's not something that culturally we seem to do much anymore. Although I just bought from Addison Hodges Hart, who's a cleric and a theologian. He's got a collection of original Christmas ghost stories that he's written, and I thought during Advent,
Dickens wrote a bunch of them too. Like in addition to the one that we know, he wrote like 3 others.
Yeah. I think it's kind of incredible. I mean, of course, he's of an era that kind of produced some really great tales that we still tell around.
Sure.
The Victorian and all that. But yeah, so it's interesting because right now we either play into it in terms of a spooky season, in terms of like we just do it because it's kitschy and fun, right?
Yeah, right. Sure.
Plastic, there's inflatables in your yard. It's just what you do,
Sure.
Or maybe it goes deeper for some people. And I think for a lot of people, it does go a little deeper. At least that there's a draw or a lure that we're kind of pulled into, at least the mysterious. I'm not even going to say spooky, not for everybody.
Sure.
Something that's still just unresolved knowledge, perhaps, or unresolved experience. And I think that why that might be compelling is that it tells us that there's something that we don't have full grasp of. And don't you think the human mind wants to solve problems?
Oh, it has to. Yeah.
But I think if we solved all the problems, don't you think that would also be frustrating to the mind?
Yeah, I have never thought of it that way, but yes, very likely. In in visual art, we talk a lot about Gestalt principles, which are this idea that you can give people incomplete information and the mind
fills it in,
forced to fill it in. That's right.
Yeah, that's how we project things on those worlds.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, our mind wants to solve problems. Yeah, I think that if we solved all the problems, I think that would bring another sense of frustration to it. Like it would kind of disenchant the world. And we've gone through these periods of time in intellectual history of enchantment and disenchantment.
Right.
Kind of one way of narrating things is to say that, like in the pre-modern mind, the world's enchanted. It's filled with ghosts and spirits and fairies or the gods and the deities. And then they're local, right? There's the god of the grove and the god of the forest and all that. And then one way of telling a story is that Christianity comes and disenchants the world. God isn't in a tree, or God isn't in that grove. God's in the heaven, and the Christians can come and cut down the forest so that the pagans don't have, basically there's a dominance in evangelization. Your God's gone, right? Like our God is more powerful than your God. So we're going to cut down your forest and build a big church there. That history, by the way, is quite questionable, and because it's told as though that just happened everywhere all the time. Of course, they were behaving badly and uncaringly, but I don't think that that's the whole picture.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, that's disenchantment, right? And then it gets worse and worse and worse through modernity. And at some point, we push God out of the picture, and we just have this grand secular world.
Right.
Well, I think what Christianity really does is it re-enchants the world in a different mode. And I think as the world becomes more disenchanted in the modern Enlightenment, we do away with God. We find ways of just being naturalistic, and humanity is cold, rational. Spock, desires to be like Spock and all that kind of stuff. I think we find other ways to re-enchant the world because we're just unhappy with a fully disenchanted world. And one example I often give is when Pokemon Go came out. You remember that game?
Mm-hmm.
And now I didn't play it, but I think about people took their phones and they would like survey their world with their phones, and they would see like characters in their world. Like you could go up to your church building on the front steps, and you could see Pokemon characters or whatever.
Sure.
Think about how that's just a digital re-enchanting of the world, because you were wishing something beyond what is there, or whatever, something that no one else can see but you, maybe, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. You're wanting to charge it with something more. So I think we're looking for enchantment, and I think that Halloween or the spooky season in some way plays into that. What do you think about that? Let's just try that thought out loud. What do you think about that, Al? Does it make sense to you? Or
yeah, it totally does. I mean, I think that let's see, there was a lot packed into there. I think that the idea of digital re-enchantment is 100% a thing. I mean, I've even seen a lot of action lately with people building 3D things people can only see with their phones, like at sporting events and things lately. Mm-hmm. So I totally buy that idea. People feeling the need to not divorce themselves from the enchantment of reality. I think that is obviously true when you look at what is most popular in our media. Like Marvel, Star Wars, all the big Harry Potter, all the stuff that people seem like they really react and mass to have some element of the fantastic to it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get that sporting events are probably just as popular, and there's much less enchantment in a sporting event. But I think that there's actually an element there that's almost the same thing, because what we're really looking at are people who are capable of physical feats that seem magical to us, like better than we can possibly do, kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I actually think it's really a form of enchantment. It's a spectacle.
Yeah.
And there's something about the spectacle that is tied to, the spectacle is often tied to the sacred. the spectacle that we think about, like we think about spectacles in our culture, we might think of Mardi Gras, or you go south into Brazil, you got the Carnival. These are spectacles that are tied to sacred things. But you can go back to ancient Rome, obviously, the Colosseum, and then the chariot races. These are grand spectacles that are tied to the deity of the nation state in some ways. So spectacle is often tied to the sacred, and it's no accident that in today's kind of modern late capitalist America, we have a strong sacred sense of the nation state. We have a civil religion, and it is on full display at sporting events, and probably nothing greater than football, even though baseball does it and everything else. It's not just a national anthem, but it's always a thing about the troops and their patches on the uniforms with the flag and camouflage, and there's flyovers with fighter jets, and it is a huge lip service being paid to what the nation state has done, what the nation state is. It's worth dying for. Soldiers who die pay the ultimate sacrifice for your freedom. It's Christ-centered language. So it's what we call a simulacra, or a facsimile of faith, right? So that's on full display in our country, and it's really heightened at sporting events, right? And you have the Colosseum effect, and it's a spectacle, right?
Right.
And so and it connects people, and of course tribalism gets tied in. So we can go on and on and on. There's a lot we'll probably talk about in other episodes about that, but yeah, I think you're right. In addition to Marvel and Harry Potter and all that, we're finding ways of enchanting ourselves.
Certainly.
You might even start by just liking sports because it, quote unquote, is a respite from your everyday life. Like it's a break from the mundane. Sure. So I think maybe the spooky season provides something of these things to people. But, going deeper, your first answer to me was that there's a fascination with death. And in particular, our spooky season, America being so heavily shaped by, Irish, Scottish, English, culture, right? We have Halloween, right? And Halloween is, for those of you who don't know, it's from All Hallows Even, or the eve before All Saints Day, All Hallows, All Holy Even, right? The night before. So on November 1 is All Saints Day. It's a day to remember the saints in the faith, those who have died, gone before, who have lived this kind of heroic, saintly life. Then on November 2nd is All Souls Day. Now you just remember the dead. So these are two Christian, they're not pagan. These are two Christian days of the dead that when the church spread to Celtic lands, they actually saw a natural time of remembering the dead and transposed it in their own way as a part of their evangelistic missionary impulses. But it becomes a time of remembering the dead. So while we're increasingly more Hispanic and Latinx in our culture, so we have more Day of the Dead influence, we are heavily historically influenced by the Celtic lands. So Halloween is huge in our culture. So that means in some way, shape, or form, there is at least the suggestion that we would think of death. I'm not sure that the culture writ large around us practices it, but it's supposed to be a time of reflecting on the dead. Do you think that you intentionally think about the dead like in a ritualistic way, or is it just kind of around you in the ether because there's skeletons and cemetery plots and in the stores now? What do you think?
Yeah, well, so I would say that a little of both. I would say that the majority of my life it was the latter that you just said, the idea that there were plastic cemetery plots around me and stuff, and so it was there. But I would say that for about the last, I don't know, close to a decade at this point, I have been involved with some church or another that actively did like a remembrance of the dead kind of thing for an All Saints Day on a Sunday morning. And I think that the first year that I was involved with that, I was serving at a church up in Rhode Island called Peacedale Congregational Church, and and I was actually the person who had to hold and physically ring the bell, and so I think that the physical connection of all of that made me like really reprocess it. And so it's been something in the forefront of my mind around that time of year.
So you rung a bell, a chime every time you named.
Yep.
Yeah. We do that here. Yeah, we do that here too. Yeah. That's. I mean, was there a lot? Was it a long list for you?
Yeah. Peacedale was, lovely church, incredible people. But it was an aging congregation. I would actually describe it as being physically located in a retirement community.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of people who were passing on.
Yeah. I think that when I became an adult and got married, and my wife and I decided we were going to have a Halloween party every year, and the whole invitation was like, we're going to celebrate every aspect of this holiday, the kitschy, the spooky, the harvest festival aspect.
Sure.
And the Christian tradition. So we told people to dress up, and we decorated spooky ways, and we had horror films in one room, and we had, just games and stuff everywhere else. And then we had a Thanksgiving feast.
Sure.
And then talk about the history of Samhain and the tradition
right.
from in the Celtic lands. And then we raised a glass at some point to honor on before us who lived the faith well. We tried to do that. And it's become a meaningful thing for me. And in our congregation, we ring a chime for the names of the congregation members who've passed or their loved ones who've passed. I mean, last year, I wasn't here. I was recovering from liver transplant surgery, but I was watching the service on the live stream.
Mm-hmm.
And at the last name read, Reverend Stone on our staff read, and for the person who lost their life, and their organ was given to Reverend Longbonds to save his life. I mean, I cried like a baby, and then I saw that there was even a place for that person in the Hall of Memories that we laid out. It just, so we try to participate in that, and my admonishment to people is think about people who've lived life well and tried to honor them. But I'll tell you, in my experience in our culture, people don't really, or a lot of people don't really like to do this. And I think it says something about our culture, because every culture, every religion, and every spirituality has baked into it some sort of Day of the Dead or remembrance of the dead. And I think it's because to be truly spiritual is to realize we're deeply connected. And so whether you're talking about the ancestors, right? If you're in a lot of indigenous spiritualities and religions, you're going to the land of the ancestors, or you're reflecting on the ancestors being present in your life today.
Sure.
Or you're talking about the communion of saints from time immemorial, right? They're thinking about those who've already gone, and they're present and active somehow still in the world, in the life, in the theocosmos, whatever.
Sure.
I think today, and I'll give you just a little anecdote. It's anecdotal evidence, but I led an All Saints service at another congregation. I was not used to doing it,
Sure.
And at the end of the service, I remember people coming up to me saying, I didn't like that. It always bothers me as a minister when people tell me they don't like what we did in church, because it's not really supposed to be about our enjoyment in the first place. It's supposed to do something, right? It's supposed to enact. It's not necessarily about our pleasure all the time.
Right.
But also I remember just how uncomfortable they were with facing the fact that they were creatures that mourned and grieved. And I thought, well, there's a wisdom in our calendar that gives us time to do that. That's a wisdom. Yeah, these people were so avoidant of it. And the more I've thought about it over the years, because it really bothered me because it was more like rejection when that happened. But over time of reflection, it's just like our culture has set it up such that people really, we're a move forward culture.
Mm-hmm.
We're not comfortable with death.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? Do you agree with me that we're not comfortable with death?
this is the first time that I've heard this idea, so I'm chewing on it. I think that yes, we are definitely uncomfortable with death, but I think that that's why we turned it into a parody at Halloween. You know,
Okay.
I think that I think that people who have had close loved ones die have had an opportunity to work through what all that stuff means. And I think that some people don't take the opportunity to work through what that stuff means. And I think that they become less comfortable. But that's all I got right at this particular moment.
Okay. That's really good. That might be one reason why we make a parody of it. I was listening to, there's a theologian, and he's at the University of Aberdeen. His name's John Behr. And I was listening to him talk once because he writes he's written a lot about death and being of death. And when he was at St. Vladimir Seminary in New York, he said the New York Times had a story about a family who had, intergenerational home, and grandma passed away, and it was during a blizzard. And he said that the ambulance couldn't come take the corpse away, like overnight. So the body was there, the corpse. And the reporter reported on how awful it was that the family had to be there with the dead body overnight. And he kind of shook his head. What kind of world do we now live in where we're that uncomfortable with death that we can't even be with the body? Like, in the course of human history, that's commonplace, to sit with the body, for the family to wash the body. But we want to remove it from ourselves, to remove it from view as something other, sick, icky. And maybe some versions of Christian theology have played into this. Like you die, you go away, escape. Maybe it's that. But I was listening to a documentary with Sylvester Stallone. He talked about how life's all moving forward. You walk forward, and it's like behind you, the sidewalk is collapsing. You can't go back, right? And I found that motivational when I was having a hard time. But I also think about how it's all forward, don't look back. All forward, don't look back. That to focus on the fact that someone has died is to have to stop and look back in some way. I don't think that I think we've removed ourselves from death as much as we can. And because of that, because we don't understand death as part of life and part of our normal experience in a way that we used to, maybe, I think we've maybe have lessened the amount of practices that we do where we truly reflect on others' deaths and therefore reflected on our own. Because to truly remember that you're going to die is to speak to your contingency or to your lack. You're not a self-sustained, complete and utter, necessary creature. Your life is indebted to so many other things for your life, right? So to know that you're going to die is to recognize the fact that you're limited, which is a very helpful thing for us humans to get our minds around. And that sounds simple and fundamental, but it's fundamental and not simple. It's complex. To understand our own limitation is to create in this an opportunity for humility.
Boom.
I think in ways that we don't process, we walk around sometimes feeling as though we were necessary. And so therefore we become entitled. Remembering your death puts you into a mode of being that it should make you want to live well each moment of the day and to prepare for your funeral, that it's a good death that you would have. I think by reflecting on death, it's one of the ways to truly learn how to live, I think. I mean, right? I'm not saying anything radical. These are things that the ancients have said, people have said for years and years and years, but
sure,
the shame that It's a shame that it's just it's either something that we want to stay away from or just make jokes about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, if the practice, if the tool that we're discussing today is reflection on death, what are the practices associated with that, other than just literally sitting down and thinking about what it might be like if I were to pass away?
It's interesting because we as before you start recording, I said let's just talk about Halloween. Let's just have a conversation about the spooky season.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I didn't have practice per se, right? It's like it's a whole big picture of the whole thing. The first spiritual thing we talked about was maybe that the mysterious, the poking at we don't understand.
Sure.
And I think that there's so what I'm doing is I'm making a connection, because what I think right there, that movement of playing with thought that is on the edge of what you understand and what you don't is an act of humility, right? And then I think that this is as well. So then specifically the focus on death, others' deaths and ours, is a practice in humility. So but then to come back and answer your question, if we were to take that up as like one significant practice of the season, which I think is appropriate, is to reflect on death. We can really lean most easily here into Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius and others. But if you read any of these classic Stoic texts, memento mori, remembering your death, is a very common practice, and it's meant to make your life better. It's a self-help tool, to be frank. I mean, it is something that one does so that they can put their life in context. Because if you remember that you're going to die, you remember this finality to it, you will stop like wasting and frittering time away. Maybe it will help you stop focusing on things that you can't control. It might help you to stop focusing on the naysayers. And really, ultimately, I think if you do it long enough, it's not going to make you live like you're dying. And I say that in that kind of colloquial Tim McGraw song, live like you're dying, so go do all these things that you would not do otherwise. Go, basically live a selfish life, a life that's unsustainable. And instead, I think what it would do is put you in the mode of realizing that you need to live more intentionally.
Right. Love it.
Keep talking.
No, I think that's fantastic. I think there's a lot of wisdom there. Easier said than done. But I do think that there's a lot of wisdom there. The stories that come to mind that have an element of that to it, that I think are relevant to spooky season, are things like, have you ever read The Halloween Tree, Ray Bradbury's book?
No, is it good?
I mean, I don't think it's one of his best, but I definitely think it's a worthy read, especially around this season. And I think that it hints at a lot of the things that you're talking about right now.
There's this book I have on my lap, and I just got up. It's called The Lost Art of Dying, Reviving Forgotten Wisdom by L.S. Dugdale. And a friend of mine who is a palliative care chaplain, when I was very, very ill, suggested it to me. And then she felt so bad saying, I don't know if I should tell you to get a book that is going to make you think about death. And I said, no, that's where I'm at. And so this author talks a lot about memento mori, thinking of death in a routine fashion, preparing for it, and recalling things of, in the liturgies that we say, like, on Ash Wednesday, from ashes, you come, to ashes you shall return. From dust you are, to dust you shall return. Remembering your death in very important ways. Remembering that life is fleeting. It's supposed to prepare you to live well. But the author brings up not just memento mori, but in what they call, historically has been called ars moriendi. the ars moriendi are sort of the arts or the practices, the things that the one did to remember that you're going to death. You're going to die one day. So like, what are those sorts of arts and texts and pieces of art that you reflect on? What are the guides? What are the things that, and historically there were like, cuttings and markings and art that would like, you could reflect on. And did you ever watch the True Detective on HBO, those shows?
Yeah, I watched, I know for sure I watched the first season. I think I skimmed the other seasons.
Yeah, that first season was so good, and philosophically, it was an attempt at being very nihilistic. In fact, I think the creator of the show's brother-in-law is a nihilist philosopher in Chicago. But you remember the character played by what's his name? Texan man. All right. McConaughey. Matthew McConaughey's he's that like sage, like, chain smoking, knee deep in a bottle of alcohol guy who's, asking all these proverbial difficult thoughts and questions and struggling with the evils of the world and the question of existence. And he's got a crucifix above his bed, but he doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe in Christ, and he doesn't believe in the resurrection and life beyond. And I think the other guy's like, well, why do you have that? Then he goes, it's a meditation for me on death. Like for him, the cross itself was a helpful guide for him to practice a meditation on his own finitude.
Sure.
So that's what the ars moriendi are, according to this author. And, they're pulling on that. So I think that if properly done, the spooky season or Halloween, it could be one of our arts of that, where we don't have to morbidly walk around with it and play with it every moment of our day, but it's a touchstone throughout the year to think about, to remind us of our finitude, to remind us of where we're at in this whole thing, because otherwise, life gets away from us really easily. So I think I would caution people. I mean, I think that some people might have some some mental health issues that I would say maybe you're in a position where it's not healthy for you to be reflecting on death all the time. So
sure.
I really, as a spiritual director, I'd walk with people where they're at. But here we are as a culture, we have this time. And I think that it's a holdover from a time when we did it better, or maybe we were at least closer ourselves to the concept of death. So the spooky season, I mean, if I'm just kind of waxing out loud with you here, like in terms of the public good or whatever, what it could mean for us as a culture, I think if we as at least individuals brought ourselves to what some of this means beyond the plastic, and beyond the credit card, because it's now just as expensive as Christmas time, basically. I mean, if we brought ourselves beyond the commercialism of it all, I think we might find and discover that there are these opportunities to bring us into a sense of grand humility about our place within history, places in the cosmos. And I'd say in our place within like that which we can even understand. I mean, it should bring us to an intellectual humility. The fact that you are reflecting on, at least some people might reflect on, the concept of a ghost, the concept on life after death, or what is life? When does it end? And when does it begin? And all those questions really are very fascinating from a science perspective, let alone a spiritual one. So what does it mean to no longer have life in my body, but to have your energy be alive somewhere else? What does that mean? And at least what that does is it brings us to a greater level of humility, right?
Absolutely.
And I think if spirituality can do something for a broader world, humility would be a really good thing. Because as we noted at the top of this, we are in this election cycle and no one's being humble about it. No.
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that that Halloween, as I mentioned a moment ago, could be considered a parody of death. Because I feel like everything that has any weight in our society needs a parody, I think the election season is just a parody straight up. Like there's nothing serious about it other than the way people react about it.
Well, my favorite Treehouse of Horror, which are the Simpsons Halloween specials.
Yeah.
Is about the election between Bill Clinton and Bob Dole, and Kang two aliens come and abduct them and start wearing them around. So they're the aliens inside of Clinton and Bob Dole.
Nice.
They're making political statements, and they're just reversing what they're saying to get people to cheer, and it's just showing how ridiculous the crowds are and how partisan the crowds are. It's like, education for all, education for none. It's just like whatever will work. And then meanwhile, Clinton and Dole are in the UFO, and they're nude and suspended in these tubes of fluid. And then they wake up, and Clinton says something funny, and Bob Dole goes, "What is this? Some sort of tube?"
That's it.
But and my family and I always say, "What is this? Some sort of tube?" I say that all the time. Mm-hmm. But I love how that episode brings together all the things that I love so much: the political silliness of it all, the spookiness, and Halloween right there. I'd love to maybe what we'll do next week, and we'll release it next. Maybe we'll talk about monsters, because I think that very specifically in the spooky season we do think about monsters, and why is it that not just death, but why is it that we've reflected on? Why do we make up stories about werewolves and vampires and zombies and ghosts, all that? And I think that's a fascinating tale. I always say that we create the monsters that we need, and the monsters tell us about ourselves more than anything else, and our need for meaning-making things in our life.
So totally agreed. Can't wait to have that conversation.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, is there anything else you can think about the spooky season that might, because this is all off the hip right here. We're talking about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'll give a couple recommendations for people if they are thinking about ways they can celebrate the spooky season. If you have little kids, there's this book called The Wolves in the Walls that I really, really recommend. One of my favorite artists did the illustrations for it. His name's Dave McKean. And it's about this little girl who's trying to tell her family that she can hear wolves in the walls, and they all blow her off because she's just a little girl. And then eventually the wolves come out of the walls, and they scare all the people out of their house, And so they're living at like they're living in the yard basically, and the dad plays the tuba, so they're sitting out in the yard with the tuba, and and eventually the little girl Lucy gets upset that the wolves have taken over their house, so they crawl back into the house through the walls where the wolves were hiding, in order to see what the wolves are doing. And then the humans burst out of the walls, and the wolves go, "Oh, there are humans in the walls!" and they go running out.
That's awesome. Yeah. You got any other recommendations?
Yeah. And then for adults, I would definitely recommend the Halloween Tree. I'm going to read very quickly the synopsis. It's a group of 8 boys go out trick-or-treating, only to discover that their 9th friend Pipkin, who's been whisked away on a journey that could determine whether he lives or dies, through the help of a mysterious character, blah blah blah. Along the way, they learn the origins of the holiday that they celebrate and the role that fear and death, ghosts, and all that haunts has played in shaping civilization. It's the Halloween Tree itself is a metaphor for the historical confluence of these traditions, So yeah. So I recommend that one. And then for films, I would, you can't beat The Nightmare Before Christmas. But is it a Halloween film or a Christmas film? No one ever seems to know.
I always say it's a Thanksgiving film.
Oh, nice. Good.
Split the difference is what I say. But yeah, we love it. We love that one. You know what? My favorite. So when the spooky season comes, as it's now, we watch the Charlie Brown Halloween
Great Pumpkin. Yes, absolutely.
We watch the Garfield Halloween special. That's where he goes out and dresses as a pirate and goes trick-or-treating, and the pirate ghosts come. That's really cool. I have a DVD of all the Roseanne Halloween specials episodes.
Nice.
Like Treehouse of Horror, right? But then my ultimate favorite Disney movie is The Legend of Ichabod Crane, with Bing Crosby narrating and singing, and the only other voice besides Bing Crosby's is not Bela Lugosi, but Boris Karloff, who has one line. He says something like or all they skin. That's all he says. But it's got Bing Crosby voicing Brom Bones and Ichabod and singing a song and narrating, and that the script of it and the songs run in the operating system of my mind all the time, like period. It's from the 40s, and the illustrations are beautiful. It's the best Disney's ever done, I think.
Nice.
So that's my big recommendation for people is that it's fun, it's a little spooky, and it's beautiful. So I could make many recommendations on things, but that's something I would really recommend. And if you are into something very terrifying and like an older for a grown up, when a horror film, it's something that's come out in the last few years that I thought was really compelling, I would say The Witch.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Good one. So, but more for another time.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, my friend. Talk soon.
All right, friends. Take care. Have a good spooky season.